Hey guys, it's Robin, RS Island Crafts, and welcome to my craft room. It's Wednesday. That means it's WiP It Wednesday, where I show you everything that I've worked on in the craft room, whether I touched it for a little bit for a couple stitches, or I've gone all the way, worked on it for an entire day, 2-3 days, or I finished a project. I do have some finished projects, I have some failed projects, and I have some fun projects. Now, as I've shown before in a video where I like to set out all my project bags like on a Sunday, and then I can just work all Sunday and work on all the different projects. I can get some embroidery in, some knitting in, just work on a variety of things. It didn't happen this weekend. I kind of set myself up not to fail, but I did have some normal everyday things that I had to take care of over the weekend. Saturday morning, I'm normally up and about and ready in the craft room before 8 a.m., but this week I decided I had to vacuum all the floors in the house. I had to mop all the floors. I had to do a little cleaning. I vacuumed underneath the refrigerator and freezer to get all the dog fur and the cobwebs and just the dust and stuff underneath there. We have tile floors in the majority of our house, so everything with the fans, it just seems to blow right underneath the refrigerator. And I swear my house is a dust bowl. It's got dust everywhere. So I also dusted a little bit. Not a lot, just enough. But that set me off just enough on Saturday that everything just seemed to take time. And that was also during the time where I had a couple failed projects. So it kind of snowballed into where I did most of my Saturdays for sewing on Sundays. So I made my quilts on Sunday. It's okay. It all works out in the end. You're going to say don't even worry about it, Robin, because once I show you all the projects I did work on, it was a great week, right? This is one of the quilts that took me a while. This one is a little bit bigger than a baby size. I was going for the 40 by 50 thereabouts. I haven't measured it. It's going to be a trend you're going to hear a lot from me. I didn't measure it. I just made it. It looks good. It fit the parameters as long as it's larger than the size that, as long as it's larger than the size that I needed, then it's okay. Things get trimmed up, things get changed, whatever. But I love this quilt. There's been several of us that have been joking back and forth on Instagram and here on YouTube that this is my favorite quilt. And then next week comes up and then we're like, oh no, that's my favorite quilt. Right now, this is my favorite quilt. I really loved the one that I did last week with the flowers and then the green and stuff like that. But this one is striking. I have a picture on my Instagram where I have it actually hanging up outside. And with the nice bright colors of outside and the green grass and everything, I do have a little green grass still. It just looks really, really sharp. So this is going to be a nice lap quilt for someone. It could be for a boy and it could be for a girl. But I just wanted something that would say this is a boy's quilt. I didn't want to have anything with flowers or a little bit of pink or purple. Because some boys don't care and other boys, they want something like this. A lot of times when you're making something towards maybe a teenage boy or, a young adult or something, they want something that screams boy. I got baseballs, I got planets, I've got skulls. This says boy. And I really love the way this turns out. And while we're speaking about quilts, I just wanted to put in a little bit of info here. If I ever show you one of these quilts that I'm making for charity, but you really fell in love with it and you'd like to purchase it, just go ahead and let me know because I'm going to be making extra. And by the time I'm done, I'm going to have at least 50, 52, maybe even 60 quilts done. I'm looking into, like I said, making some for the baby in the NICU, and those are only going to be like 17 or 18 inches, so I'm going to be able to, crank those out really good. So if you ever see one of these quilts that I show on my WiP It Wednesday, Talk It Tuesday, whenever, and you would love it, I can either possibly make another one just like it if I have enough fabric, or you can go ahead and purchase the one that I've already made. Don't feel bad like you think you're taking it from charity or anything like that, because in the long run, I will need to sell a few of these in order to raise the funds so that I can purchase batting to make more of them. Okay, now that that's over, this was the first quilt that I worked on. I made this quilt. I have not gotten to the binding yet. Last week's quilt, I'm not even going to bother taking it out of the bag. You guys have seen this one. I went ahead and made the binding for it. If you've joined me over on my Patreon channel, I do have a link for it down below in the description. I did put up a video this week. I believe it went up on Monday that shows, I took you step by step through how I process, how I think about my binding, why I choose different ways, and I showed you from start to finish on how I make it, and this is the quilt that I used as my example. So this one, I have the fabric ready to decide if I want to put it on the backing. So this one is in its bag. I've decided I'm going to store all of these quilts individually. in these Ziploc bags. I just popped up to the Dollar Tree and I picked up a bunch of these. You get 14-gallon size bags. These are even freezer ones, so they're nice and sturdy. And I figured for $1 for 14 of them, I picked up 4 or 5. I'm just going to go ahead and store all the quilts in here. This way everything stays together. It stays nice and clean, and I don't have to worry about dust or cats or losing any of the fabrics. So this guy will eventually get folded up, and he's got his own bag. I know you didn't need to see that, but that's what I did. And speaking of quilts in a bag, the one I showed last week, you can see a big shot of this on my Talk to Me Tuesday. This was the one that was donated to me to add to my donation quilts. I believe this is the Disappearing 9 patch, just based on the designs that are here. I added blue borders to both sides. So now this one is all set. It is ready for its next step, which will be binding. So I'm sticking with the process of making sure I have binding made for all of them. I can worry about the backing later because I can always purchase a few yards of the extra wide backing fabric or go through what I have in my stash. It doesn't have to specifically, I don't have to have this baseball fabric on the back of this quilt. I can use any type of fabric I want as long as it's kind of cohesive. And sometimes I do a total shocker, like just because I have these blacks and the grays and the reds, I might want to put maybe I want a neon green to go against the moon, or maybe I just want to use a dark blue or an entire black backing, and then just let my quilting threads show up on the back. So I don't have to worry having specifically these fabrics, because most of these quilts are being made from scraps. So those are my successes for the week. Let's talk about some of my failures. I talked about last week how after I'd already done my WiP It Wednesday video, I put a little pinned note in the bottom in the comments that popped up in my feed on YouTube for Rob Appel's video, Man Sewing. He made a skull cap, welding cap, a do-rag, however you want to look at it, and it had what I wanted. It had all the features that I really wanted. There's no exposed seams. He had this little trick where even though on the sides it's only one piece of fabric, so it's not too thick or hot, the top part in the center, it's 2 pieces, so it's reversible. All the seams are caught on the inside. It has the doubled band like I like. It has the ties that are doubled, and it's all sewn, and there's no raw edges, and everything looks great. But as I was making this, I realized this is definitely not something I'm going to make in excess of. I don't want to do a production sewing over and over and over again for the Cancer Center to donate these. And the reason why, we were really surprised. A couple of us were talking, and doing this brim right here, this seemed like the hardest part. Because what it was is when you were stitching it, you had all of this stitched up like this, and then you were trying to sew the 2 pieces together and scooting around. That was actually the easiest part. I struggled with these parts back here in the back. Now this was done properly, like it had to be folded over, but I didn't fold it just right, so as you can see I have a raw edge there. I didn't catch all the seams properly here, and the same problems over here. Now this one I caught it, but then it folded over. Now these are all things that are easy to fix. But as I was going through the process, this was taking me start to finish probably about an hour and a half to make this hat. Now, as you get making more, you will speed up, but I think an hour per hat and a half a yard of fabric, this just isn't going to be one of the things that I can donate. Now, I don't mind making these if, this one works fine. Even though it's falling, it's got seams and everything, I'll go ahead and stitch that down. I don't mind. This is going to be for me, and I'll wear it during the summer when I mow the yard. I do need to get a big straw hat to keep the sun off of my face and my shoulders and stuff. But this would be nice underneath it so that the straw doesn't itch your head. And let's face it, when it feels like 112 degrees out and you're mowing the yard, you're going to sweat. So this will be nice to absorb the sweat. And I really do just like this fabric. So this was a successful fail, okay? I did not make one of the Giants fabric for Rob. I told him I know it's not going to work. I had him try this one on, and it's strange. But okay, I have more of like a round head, And Rob has more of a, I call it a cowboy hat head. All the cowboy hats he's ever had have always been long and narrow. So his head is more like this, where the kids and I are more of a rounder head. So this just comes to say that this was way too big for him. This fabric was bunching up like this over his ears. Could I adjust it? Sure. But just making him just having a regular bandana, he can fold it and manipulate it enough that when he wears it on his poor little bald head, it works perfectly. So I thought, okay, well, I'll make you some bandanas out of what little bit of Giant's fabric I have left, right? So I'm going to take the bandana that he already has, and I'm going to measure it all up, and I'm going to see, okay, does it work this way? Does it work that way? Let's just, lay the bandana down and cut around it. If you've ever looked at a bandana, they're kind of like crooked this way, and they're not square, and they're not really even this way. This side might be 22 inches, and this side might be 20 or 21. Then you might have 19 this way and 16 this way. They're just not perfect. So I decided I'll lay it down there, and I'll just trace around it, cut around it, and leave some room for making the little the little hem here. I don't have a rolled hem foot on my sewing machine yet, so I did an 1/8 of an inch and an 1/8 of an inch. This was my actual second try. I do not see my first try. It was even smaller than this. What had happened is I had some strange cuts of fabric where, it was kind of like an L or like a Z. So I take it out, and then I look at this side, and I trace all around it, cut it around so it's just a little bit bigger than the other one. I left myself plenty of room. I did it like this much, right? And I thought, okay, well, the Giant's fabric was really at an angle, so let me square that up. Well, then I'll square it up this way and square it up that way. Yeah. This one worked out really well, except it was about 2 inches off on just one side. When I held it up to his other gray bandana that he's been wearing, there was like all this gray bandana sticking out over here. I'm like, ugh. And this was really, I did it twice. So here's the thing. Don't try to sew when you're tired, because you're going to make mistakes. We all know that. We never follow the rules. But I thought, how bad could I mess this up? I'm putting the bandana right on top. I'm cutting around it. I'm doing good, right? The problem is I took it out to the kitchen floor where I had enough space to lay it down. I trimmed all the way around the gray bandana with the Giant's one on top, right? And then I brought it into the craft room, and that's where I kind of totally messed up. Because as I said, the Giant's fabric was a little wonky, so I started trimming it up a little here and a little there, and it just ended up to be too small. So I'm not gonna get rid of this. I can just trim this off, and then I'll save this for another project. There's no more of the large pieces of the Giant's fabric. This is the largest piece that I had left. Rob doesn't need anything with any more large Giant's fabrics. If he does, I can always order more online. It's not like it's rare to find. It's really easy. Most of the time when I purchased it, I had to purchase 5 yards. I've done that twice, so I've already gone through 10 yards of Giant's fabrics for him. So he's got a lot of little things all over the place, so he doesn't necessarily need anything new. That was my fail times 2. Did I show you this hat when it was all finished last week? This is the Bonbon hat. I think I mentioned that when you wear it on your head that this won't be as pointy, it all settles down. So I just wanted to make sure I brought it back just in case I didn't show that. But I did finish the Barley Light. Now look how tiny this hat looks. Because of the way the decreases are made differently on the top than this one, it's really the same size-ish, because this has a bit of stretch to it, but it just looks so much smaller because it curves in. So the Barley has this nice little detail here where you do this reverse stockinette or something. It's almost like a garter ridge, but you're knitting it in the round, so it's stockinette. And then it's just got the regular stockinette all around. It has about the same decreases up to the top, but it's kind of like almost like a starfish with the swirl. And that is done. Now I'm going to be making some fingerless mitts in these colors. I think with the mitts I'm going to make them the light purple, and I'm going to put the strip of dark purple on here to accent it, and they will both be the same. And for this one, the mitts, I've already started this one. It's not going to be in the same fabric, but it's going to be the same yarn, but it's going to be a neutral color like this in the same color field family tone. So let me show you what those look like. This is a free pattern. I I've linked it up on my Ravelry page. I haven't done any pictures for half of my things, but there's usually a link on the Ravelry page. So these are called the log cabin mitts, and they're from Fringe. Let's see, they're from Karen Templer in association with Fringe Association. But they're just like log cabins when you're doing a quilt. You start with your center square and you work all the way around it, and then it has this detail where you join the palm with the back of the hand, and it's like that. So I thought these are going to be really fun. So if you remember, this is the yarn that the hat is in. And this is the yarn that I'm making the log cabin mitts in. This is actually considered it's a purple. It's more of a gray purple. And then this is an actual light gray. And then we have some light brown and some beige. And I've only just started on the first mitt, but I think these are going to look really well together. They're going to look nice together. They're going to blend nicely. If you're really into making sure, like if you're not wild and crazy like me where you want to wear bright neon things with pastels at the same time, I think these are going to go nice together. But this is that purple. This was my first square. This is my second. I am getting ready. I have, oh, there's my loop. My needle kept falling out because you only have one loop here. It's a free pattern, so it's okay. So you just take it, and I'm going to pick up all these stitches, and I'm going to make my log here. And then you're just going to keep working around, and then you do some magical thing, and you have mitts. So these have been really fun. As you see, I've only worked on it for a little bit, but these, it's really nice. This yarn is really nice to work with. It's still a wool. This was a kit from A Verb for Keeping Warm, which is yarn, and Fringe Association. This is the log cabin mitts, naturally dyed in the mountain colorway. Very, very pleased. Now you guys are going to see a lot of knitting today because I didn't get to do too much in my other crafts. I didn't get to do the embroidery. I kept wanting to work on my button project, but that just never came up either. Once again, I had that weird time where this time I think I put 3 rows on my latest dishcloth. I mean, it's getting there, right? Little by little. Sometimes I just have, like, we're getting ready to leave for a doctor's appointment and you have about 5 or 10 minutes. I can't just sit there and stare at a TV because it drives me crazy when you're just waiting to leave the house and you gotta leave the house in like 10 minutes. So you just sit there and wait for 10 minutes. So times like that, it's great to pick up a dishcloth and just work on it because you can set it back down in the middle of a row, never pick it up again for 2 weeks, and you'll still know where you're at. I did work on my socks, or at least on one sock. This one was somewhere down here, I believe, so I've got it all the way up. This is where my toe ended. So I've worked several rounds into that, and I really do enjoy the way this yarn, I mean, you can kind of tell what you're going to get here, but then when it actually starts to work up and it starts striping like that, that's really nice. So this yarn is Knit Picks Felici, and this is Mixed Berries. Definitely looks like a mixed berry. So that stripes up nicely. These are for me, spoiling myself a little bit. I still have not ordered Robbie's yarn. I think there's a little reason for that. Subconsciously, if I think about it, if I order his sock yarn and it comes into the house, then I'll feel obligated to pick it up and start knitting. So I'm thinking that I'm going to wait until maybe into March, and then I'll worry about ordering his yarn so I can get myself. Now I can't knit his socks until I finish mine because it's all in the same needle. So these have to be cleared first. But once I have the yarn in the house, then I can pick it up and knit on it whenever I feel like starting it and whenever I have needle space. Because I'm not that type of girl that if I have these socks on the needles, I'm not going to cast on a pair of socks for him. Because they're both still going to be the same kind, just knitting round and round and round. I don't see the point in having 2 pairs of socks just to look at 2 different colors of yarn. Now, if one were a cable sock and one were a plain sock, then that'd be a different story. I've got one more knitting project, and then I can show you some more sewing. I picked up the gray shawl quite a bit this week. As you can see, I've gotten this much done. I believe I have over 200, maybe over 300 stitches on the needle. I was timing myself today because I wanted to see how long it would take me to knit a row. And if I'm just knitting straight and I'm not like daydreaming or people watching or anything, it takes me about 3.5 minutes to knit all the way from one needle to the next. So that's not too bad. And once again, this is garter stitch, so every time you see one of these bumps, this is actually 2 rows, so it's kind of double what your eye is seeing. Knitting's kind of funny that way. It doesn't look like a lot of knitting, but when you are the person knitting it, you do realize how much you've actually knit that day. Okay, one more project. I did work on my hand stitching for the quilt along that I'm doing. These are my first 3 blocks. And then here's my 4th block. We worked on the hourglass. Now each little one wasn't too bad. I find that as time's going on, I mean, this is several hours into each project. I believe I spent close to 8 hours on this one, a little more than 8 hours on that one, maybe a day and a half. This one took me over 2 days, and this one actually took me less than 2 days. It went together really quick. I figured out, I bought some nice new gold needles, these really tiny thin ones that they suggested for doing this. While the little eye of the needle is teeny tiny, the needle's nice and long and it's nice and firm, even though it's stiff, not too flimsy like you might see with some needles. And I found the rhythm of my hands to get my 2 hands together. But the problem I had is I'm struggling still with my seams. Now, as you're stitching it by hand, you can flip-flop your seams any way you want, and it works out really well. But when it gets time to put all these individual units together into one block, you need to make sure your seams are all pressed and you know exactly where you're going. And figure pressing them did not work. So it took me a little bit to figure out how I got my seams to all spin nicely. See, when you spin your seams, you get that nice little 4 patch. Even though it's not pressed not much anymore. So you get a cute little 4 patch. In the center, I had a lot of dog ears that I didn't trim before I stitched them together. So I've learned, trim your dog ears and make sure you press your individual units before you make your block. But you can see my stitches. They're not teeny tiny. Some of them are tinier than others. They don't all match. They're not all equal. And a lot of times as you're stitching, then you'll go and take a back stitch. So sometimes that sets it off a little bit. But I'm really enjoying this process. But I find that this is not a take-along project for me. I prefer to take my knitting. It's harder to pick these up and set it down. If I were sitting somewhere at a table for long periods of time, like when you're watching a presentation or whatever, I can't see myself taking this to like a doctor's appointment or something. It's just that tiny sharp needle and it's just a little bit too much. Plus I find my 50-year-old eyes need some really good lighting to be able to see to do these projects. These are each going to have white sashing in between. I discuss all of this on my blog post if you want to check it out down below, rsilentcrafts.blogspot.com. It's always down below in the description box. But I'm really enjoying the way this is going together, and this week's block that's come out on Monday is the Ohio Star. So we are doing a 6.5 inch Ohio Star block, so that's going to be fun. I mean, it may sound like that I didn't say that it was going to be like fun, but I think that's going to be a lot of fun. Is that better? I think it's going to be a little tedious and to get all the little pieces together and to work on it, but I think overall when I'm done, I'm going to say I enjoyed it. I'm still using the batiks. I'm trying to use different fabric that I hadn't used yet for each of the blocks. Sometimes that's working out and sometimes it's not. It all depends on the size of the block I need to cut, the square I need to cut to start with. So that's it for me this week. Please let me know in the comments what you guys are working on. I really enjoy hearing about the different projects that you're working on. And sometimes I get a nice little idea of my next project based on what you're working on. Alright guys, have a great week and I'll see you next time. Bye!